Monica, welcome.
Hi, how are you? Thank you.
I'm great. I'm great. Well, awesome. Thanks for joining us today. Here to talk about social selling and community-led growth, which are obviously two hot topics for most teams, most conversations these days. Before we jump into it, give everybody a quick intro on your side.
Yeah, so my name's Monica McElroy. I was an SDR for about 4 years, graduated university 5, 6 years ago, and then over the last year, I've become an SDR manager. As a kid, I really didn't realize the potential and the potential of like the SDR world. I didn't know a lot about tech sales. And being an SDR manager and coaching SDRs, career coaching, copywriting, and social selling has been extremely rewarding because I really didn't realize it was a possibility when I was in school. So, yeah, it's a little bit about me, SDR manager, love all things SDR and outbound.
Nice, nice. Just out of curiosity, what did you major in school?
Communications.
Some of my best employees have been out of liberal arts colleges or degrees, and communications being one of the big ones. So,
Yeah.
hats off to you. It brings a lot to the equation. So, awesome to hear on that side of things. And yeah, I've been an SDR myself as well as managed SDR teams for most of my career. So you have my deepest sympathies as well as respect on a lot of that side of things. I tell people often if you're trying to get trained and ready for being a parent, uh, being an SDR manager is about the best training that you can have in a lot of cases. Who's your friend?
Yeah. His name's Dusty. He just got a haircut today, so I'm showing off his haircut. He was just at the groomer.
Nice, nice, super cute. Well, awesome. So before we jump into kind of all the details of it and stuff like that, we've got two terms in the title or the topic of it today that have a lot of variability as far as definition of what these entail. So let's start there. How would you define or characterize community-led growth and social selling?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a short story, kind of an example, because I feel like an example is the best way to explain what I'm getting at. So a couple years, I was selling technical content to tech marketers at companies that were targeting developers. So developers and developer types really don't like to be directly prospected to, kind of cold called or cold emailed. And so I really wanted to figure out a way to like almost become one of them and really get into their world, listen to podcasts they were listening to read their blog posts, just really like kind of immerse myself in their world. So I realized these tech marketers or developer marketing people spent a lot of time on Twitter. So I kind of had a target account list, and I found kind of my ICP, looked a bunch of them up on Twitter, followed a bunch of them on Twitter, and just started really engaging with them and building relationships. And then I started diving into the content they enjoy, just like kind of ideas or concepts that are relatable to them, valuable to them, resonate with them. So I started prospecting kind of very indirectly to these developer marketing folks on Twitter, and I really built a community there. And I feel like that's a good way to start the conversation. But it was kind of I grew my prospecting strength or abilities through creating community on Twitter.
Amazing. Very familiar with those challenges selling to that persona. My previous
Yeah.
company was a data orchestration tool. So we were selling to developers and engineers and talk about people that are prickly about cold outreach. And even if you like, especially getting them on the phone, like prickly to get them on the phone and then hard to get much out of them if you do. And so, social and doing it through value add content and social selling is one of the only ways to get to that audience versus, also on the go to market side, tend to be more receptive to it and certainly more used to it. So definitely understand the need there on that side of things. What about what is the distinction between community led growth and social selling for you, or is there
Um,
one?
yeah, that's a good question. I was gonna say, well, is there? Um, I don't think there is. I think that social selling and community-led growth, like through social selling, I'm trying to build relationships and build community. I think that they mean maybe very slightly different things, but they're kind of getting back at the same concept, which is creating real relationships and creating real community with your prospects and the people that you're trying to make an impact on, whether it's you trying to find a job and networking with sales leaders on LinkedIn or networking with your prospects and building relationships there.
Awesome. So I would assume you've seen a lot of what I have, and certainly almost universally people that I talk to, which is that the old kind of volume run and gun game it doesn't work anymore. So the idea that you're going to go and hire a bunch of people straight out of college with no sales experience, in a lot of cases no work experience at all, and say, here's your sequencing tool, here's your list, here's your power dialer, like just do activity. Sort of, frankly, I think broke a few years ago. I just think that most people didn't see it at the time, and it took sort of the pull back on the VC investment front and the slowdown economically to really expose an issue that had actually been there for a while, which is then a big part of the reason why social selling and community-led growth have become such hot topics right now, is because everybody's sort of running around trying to figure out, like, what do I do now? Everything we used to
Yeah,
do doesn't work.
yeah.
So have you seen similar things on your side of things?
Yeah, totally. So I've definitely been a part of like a bunch of different organizations who kind of expect like 50 personalized emails a day, 100 dials a day to kind of get to their goals. But like with open rates being so low, email deliverability being more tricky than ever, and phone connect rates being lower than they've ever been as well. Um, I like just exactly what you described. Like I couldn't agree with you more. Just like getting into your prospects' communities and meeting them where they're at and just genuinely building relationships. I think that people understand what salespeople are doing, but that kind of community-led growth approach, like it shows genuineness, it shows you being authentic, and it's a lot more real and personable, which is why I think people are open to it. But yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
So what are some of the tactics, strategies that you see that people do successfully, or are key to being able to successfully do community-led growth, social selling campaigns? And then what are some of the ones that you see people do, the common mistakes?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I feel like you had two questions there, so let me. Can you say the first one again? Sorry.
Both sides of the coin. What are the
Yeah,
essential things that you should do to successfully execute against it? And then what are
yeah,
the things that you see people do that they shouldn't be doing often?
yeah. So what should you do, and then what are some common mistakes? Yeah, so I think the big thing with social selling or community led growth is really understand where your prospects are hanging out. So when I was prospecting to these developer marketing types, they were on Twitter. A couple of years ago, I also had a gig prospecting to robotics engineers. And there's a big robotics hub in Germany. So a lot of them were on this platform called zing.com. So to get back to your question, I think that at first you have to do a lot of research to understand where these people are hanging out. So I think that sometimes, like, people will waste time trying to do social selling with, like, for example, HR leaders on LinkedIn. And it's like, are HR leaders spending a lot of time on LinkedIn? Like, I personally don't know. But I think first it's really big or important to do that research about finding where, because, like, you can try to do social selling, but like I could try to do social selling with robotics engineers on Twitter, but they're on zing.com and they're not on Twitter. So I think first of all, you really have to find where are these people hanging out? And then I think listening to the podcasts, reading the blog posts, and really just kind of getting in the brain of these people at first. So I think the research is really important at first, and then secondly, to be a bit of like an observer and just like a sponge and absorbing and learning a lot of information by being in these communities, and then just kind of being a part of them and like in a way like kind of acting like they do and like just trying to get into their circle and kind of like use jokes that might resonate with them, their sense of humor, their style, their mood, and kind of interact with them in a way that you can tell by how long you've observed them, how they want to be interacted with, and kind of start to build relationships with them that way.
Got it. And so if you're somebody that's starting from scratch and they're trying to answer that question of where do these people actually live and engage, do you have any tips or tricks for trying to figure out and locate where that is?
Um, I've just done like it sounds really silly and stupid. I think like just like using Google and Chat GPT, and I think that yeah, just to do like research of where these people are hanging out. I think that like sometimes you'll kind of enter five communities where you think your prospects are hanging out. It takes a lot of trial and error, right? Like one time I was prospecting to internal communications folks, and I joined some Slack communities. I kind of went into a couple different communities, and then just by trial and error and like that research, I could see which communities were most active. So I would just say do the deep dive, like doing a lot of research, and then you kind of got to find out for yourself and put the work in to see where like are these people hanging out here, there, the other thing.
Great. What
Yeah.
are what are some of those mistakes you see people do way too often when it comes to this?
I think that people are just so they don't understand the nuance of like building a relationship and then going in for the like kind of ask or call to action thing. And I think they jump the gun too early and don't provide enough educational value, entertainment value, and just really take the time to create the relationship with that person. So a lot of people have asked me, they're like, okay, you're creating relationships with these people, but like ultimately you're trying to sell them something. So like when do you know is the right time to kind of take it to that next level? And I think that there's a real art and nuance to it. And I think people just jump the gun too early. And that's something that people struggle with. And I think there's a lot of trust there that if you take the time to like build those relationships, people will trust you, and then you can kind of tell when it's the right moment to take it to the next step or next level. But yeah, don't jump the gun, don't pitch slap, and don't be too overbearing too early, and provide that educational entertainment value before you're too aggressive with your pitch slapping.
100%. I see too much of that, but I've also encountered on the other side of it where head reps are really good at going and sussing out like what one of my co-founders called at one point non-creepy excuses to reach out to people. And so, did they go to the same school as your brother? Are they same, from the same hometown, whatever, follow the same team? Uh, but then they got stuck in that conversation, and then it's like now it's real
Yeah,
awkward to try and pivot that to a business conversation or a sales pitch. Uh,
yeah.
are there any tips or tricks on kind of when and where to navigate that kind of on both sides of the equation? So, in my experience, it's been kind of a threading of the needle. Whatever the conversation is around building the relationship or the warm introduction or whatever, while still keeping it contextual to, or at least alongside the actual business topic at hand. So what advice do you have for people struggling with that?
Yeah, so one thing that I do that I feel like kind of helps in these situations, so I really take my time to build relationships, and if I'm having a conversation like you were just speaking about, I'm not going to necessarily on the same day in the same conversation kind of like pivot and try to make my pitch. I kind of do things over a longer period of time. But one thing that I really do is I think a lot of people, they kind of admired my approach to social selling or community led growth, if you will. And I asked them just to basically have a coffee chat and say, I'm kind of new to the developer marketing world, for example. I'm trying to learn a little bit more about what you guys do. Can I have a coffee chat with you? And so I think going back with people, like going back and forth on Twitter and LinkedIn, and then eventually, once you have enough rapport, I feel like it feels comfortable to ask for a coffee chat. And then I think on that coffee chat, you can be frank with them. Like they're telling you a little bit about what's going on with their developer marketing initiatives, for example, at their company. And then they're kind of like, what's going on with you? What are you working on? And then you kind of just explain it. And I think that they can, like, they're receptive to your, like, kind of pitch or just like talking about what you're working on because you've taken such a genuine interest in them as well. So I think that you build that relationship. I think that you like can know when it's the right time to have that coffee chat. And if you've genuinely become friends with these people, they're kind of like excited to meet with you and network with you too. And then just kind of getting a little history or story or intro from like both of you guys on the phone, and you can kind of start to talk about it. And I think that makes it not awkward, and I feel like it's a good transition. And just kind of, I think the other big thing is not being very forceful, but it's like this is what we're working on. Like we provide technical content to tech marketers. Like I'm not sure if this is a big priority for you guys right now, but if there is a fit and you guys do have a need, you know that I'm here for that too, as well as like shooting the shit with you on on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever it is. So I think it's also about like not being too aggressive and pushy. It's just kind of like this is what we're doing, and if you need this, like I'm here for that too. Like you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, no, awesome. Be authentic, be humble within that. Always, especially if you're somebody early on, don't hesitate from using that angle that you mentioned of like, I'm new to this.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I need to gather some information. I need to gather some data. Would you be my guinea pig?
Yeah.
If you're kind of hat in hand and asking for help, people tend to be pretty darn receptive to that, in my experience at least. So two things that you had mentioned as far as like what type of engagement you're doing it, value add and humor. Are there any other sort of tactics or angles that you like to lean on?
Um. So I think those are my two really big things. So I like to post or share content that's valuable. My pillars are valuable, relatable, and I actually say in my like social selling presentations is shooting the shit. So yeah, valuable, relatable, and shoot the shit content. That's kind of the way that I connect with people.
Got it. Can you give us a few examples of those different flavors?
Yeah, sure. I had a really good I have a really good slide on this. Unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me. So when I was prospecting to these tech marketers, one of them tweeted saying, if you have a 7 a.m. call, like how early do you need to get out of bed to like prepare for the call? And I'm like like I'm a bit of a like last minute Larry, so I made a joke and I was like, oh, 12 minutes before gives you enough time to like go to the washroom and like pop in your espresso pod and make you your coffee. So that was just like a little silly shoot the shit moment that I had with him. And then I posted actually about Chris Walker's State of Demand Gen podcast, where he like spoke specifically about product marketing. And this guy was a technical product marketing manager at a big tech company. So I posted a quote from that podcast and just kind of suggested to my Twitter audience for them to check that out. Um, so he really likes that. He went on to listen to the episode, and when I had that coffee chat with him, he just told me about some things he found compelling about the podcast. And then I said also, in terms of the relatable thing, I made some kind of quote where I said, often product marketers talk too much about product features, not about kind of the pain points or focusing on the customer, just being very feature focused. So those were three. That was one example of the shoot, the shit, the relatable, and the valuable content. Yeah, that was a good
Yeah.
example. That yeah, that coffee chat eventually turned into a meeting for our sales team, and then eventually some closed won business for our sales team as well. The one thing I will say is that with the nuance of social selling and kind of this community led growth concept, is that because it's so thoughtful and intentional, it might take a little bit longer to get those meetings because you're not just going in there high volume, like pitch slapping people and being very aggressive and impersonal, but it gets you further just a little bit slower, I would say.
Yeah, I actually you got ahead of a question I was going to ask, so a great segue, which is obviously this takes time,
Yeah.
both from like a time horizon of building the relationship and stuff like that, but also around like the research and trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to reach out on? What is the angle? What's the value? All of that stuff. Which means that you need to be relatively efficient at those relatively inefficient motions. Counterintuitive as all of that sounds, how do you manage that and make sure that you're moving things through in an efficient manner in a process that takes a while and is by nature sort of nebulous and doesn't lend itself to activity KPIs and metrics.
Yeah, so I think that a lot of times when I'm starting social selling initiatives at new companies that I'm working at, I do make sure to get in like the activity, like calling KPIs, email KPIs, or like kind of amount of canned LinkedIn message KPIs, whether it's like daily or weekly activities set. And then I kind of do my social selling initiative on top of those KPIs. And because there isn't that amount of proof in the pudding yet, I'll kind of spend 80% of my time doing those, like hitting call volume or email volume until I kind of prove my point. And so as I start to just see the quality of meetings that I'm booking on the social side. I think that's another big thing that I really want to mention as well. I think with very high volume impersonal outreach, you might book meetings because of the sheer volume of outreach that you're doing. But the quality of meeting and the average contract value of a deal that's sourced from like very high volume impersonal outreach is going to be less than kind of like in my opinion and from my experience from like kind of social selling or community led growth sourced like deals or revenue because you created that relationship, like people want to like give you the chance to say your piece, they want to learn more about you, you've taken that interest in them. So that was a little all over the place, but
Oh, that's perfectly fine.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Apologies. So yeah, on that, sort of begs the question a little bit, though, especially relative to who leadership management may be. What do you do with somebody who is skeptical of this type of motion? Obviously, success in having those metrics where you can say like, "Hey, I did this and it led to X or Y," goes a really long way. Uh, but even whenever it comes to that 10-20% of your time spent doing it, where what do you suggest reps or managers of reps who have that sort of skepticism or pushback, especially from kind of old school people that want to see those activity metrics, and even if you've had some wins and successes, are maybe not comfortable with the lack of visibility they have into what you're doing on that side of the equation.
um yeah, so I feel like I sort of addressed this, but I make sure to hit those kind of like email or call KPIs and do this as something additional or on top of what's already set out. Because I think when there isn't that proof in the pudding, they don't know me and they also don't have that kind of proof in the pudding specific to their organization, like they haven't seen it work in their organization. It's something that I just do, like even if it's after hours a little bit, or I make sure to hit their baselines, and then I just build on top of that. So I think that it's really hard to like convince your management to say like, I'm super young, like you've been in business development for X many years, and I'm gonna have the audacity to say your method that you've been using to like get reps to, you know what I mean, do their business development job for the last 15 years isn't going to work. And here's me, and I'm coming in with a bang and like saying exactly what's going to work. So I think it's a case that needs to be built out over time, by you like meeting the KPIs that they like activity KPIs that they already set out for you in other areas, which can be frustrating. But once you start to like, once there's the proof in the pudding on that social selling and community led growth side, they will be more open to like more conversations with you about it once you start to like you're meeting those baseline KPIs and then you're going above and beyond kind of doing that social selling stuff. So
Awesome. So for reps, you've gotten the initial conversation going. You've got a foot in the door. As you've already mentioned, it takes time to nurture and build these relationships. What are the best strategies for staying top of mind? For these people that you've gotten the conversation going with, but it's going to take some time.
you mean with the prospects, like making your like making sure you're staying on top of mind with all those prospects?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So what is great about Twitter and LinkedIn is just like they're always posting content, or if you have the type of prospects that are kind of like sharing a lot of content, I think it's just staying on top of interacting with them and responding to what they're putting out. The other thing too is you'll follow a bunch of prospects or get connected to a bunch of prospects on Twitter and LinkedIn, and not all of them either will be super just like posting a lot there, like first of all, and second of all, they won't be as kind of like responsive or engaging as much with you because you might be trying to engage with them, but they're not kind of engaging back. So usually I'll have a list of kind of like the top 10 to 20% of my prospects that I've connected with on that platform. And I can see that it's kind of reciprocal, like they're interested in building that relationship back with me. And I'll really focus on basically people where it's like it's both ways, you know what I mean? So like yeah, staying on top of relationships, I'll usually have a list of kind of my top 10 to 20% of engaged prospects or people I'm trying to connect with. And I'll have like a Google Doc list of them. I'll be engaging with their stuff, they're engaging with me. And then like on a like it depends on the ICP, depends on a lot of things, depends on the ACV as well. But I'll probably go through that entire list at least 2, 3 times a week and make sure there's just some additional touch point. Like, did I miss something that they tweeted today? And or so, like a LinkedIn message that they sent me or a LinkedIn post that they made, a podcast they were featured on. And I'll kind of go through that list at least a few times a week and make sure that I have a few touch points throughout the week.
Awesome. And then what about those that don't make the cut as far as, sufficient engagement, stuff that they're posting? Do those just sort of wind on the cutting room floor, or do you have other approaches?
Good question. So like unfortunately not everybody's ICP first of all is going to be really active on a social platform at all or not on every social platform, and then some prospects are just going to be like more or less receptive to certain types of outreach. So while I am really big on social selling and community led growth, I understand that not everybody is on Twitter, not everybody's on LinkedIn. So I still kind of have my email engine running in the background. I think one big thing is that, like for this developer marketing persona, I had noticed about one of my prospects that I couldn't find him on Twitter, couldn't find him on LinkedIn, but he actually had a YouTube channel that basically taught people a lot about just about developer marketing and the profession. And so when I was emailing him, even though it was hard for me to kind of connect with him on YouTube and he wasn't too active on Twitter and LinkedIn, I could email him kind of more personalized emails about a lot of the cool stuff he was doing on YouTube. So it's just about finding different angles. And again, as I always say, finding people where they're at, because not everybody's going to be active everywhere.
For those people that you that are active and you have the opportunity to engage with on social, is that the primary exclusive focus, or are you still running a multi-channel, omni-channel outreach approach across things like email, phone, stuff like that?
It totally depends on the ICP. So yeah, that's basically what I would say. I think that if you're trying to prospect to robotics engineers in Germany that are 8 hours ahead of you and you're not in the same time zone, it's going to be really challenging to call them. And I had a lot of success on LinkedIn and that platform Zing that I told you about. But prospecting to HR leaders, for example, like when I was doing it a few years ago, it was a lot more productive to connect with them on the phone. So that's a big thing to say about social selling and community-led growth as well, is that it's not going to work for every ICP. And LinkedIn and Twitter aren't the only places to do social selling as well. There's Slack communities, just like Rev Genius. If you want to connect with sales and marketing leaders, you can find them there. So yeah, that's what I say.
Fair enough. So yeah, within that, you know, obviously LinkedIn, Twitter, big focuses. You know, within all of that, how close do you work with, you know, your marketing, content team, stuff like that, to try and, you know, either leverage what they're creating as, you know, potentially some value add that you can share, and or helping them, you know, get out the word and distribute what they've got on that. And then in my experience, that's been extremely valuable feedback for me on the demand gen marketing side of things, because, you know, reps that are boots on the ground actually having real life conversations with people can give you a lot of really valuable feedback on the you know, sort of anecdotal qualitative side of things to marry with that quantitative, because a lot of times at that high volume 20,000 foot level you lose a lot of that. So how tightly do you and your teams that you manage typically coordinate with those marketing, you know, content demand gen teams?
Yeah, I think that outbound SDR teams and marketing should be super aligned, because kind of how I view doing outbound, especially on this kind of social selling or community-led growth side, is that like I consider, like, even when I'm doing this the SDRing, I'm kind of considering myself like a bit of a mini content marketer myself, because when I'm like building up these communities and relationships in these communities, I'm like starting to generate inbound for myself. So it's kind of like this whole inception, like outbound is turning into like generating inbound. So it kind of like gets a little confusing. I think it's super important. It really depends like on the organization and how open they are to have like that sales and marketing alignment. But I think it's super important. And as you said too, like senior marketing executives that don't like, they're kind of at that 30,000 foot view, and me giving them that feedback is really important. A couple of organizations I've worked really closely, specifically with content marketing and demand gen product marketing too, on copy. Another big thing is that when you're really part of these communities, you really learn a lot of the jargon that your ICP like uses and says. And I think putting that back into product marketing messaging, like demand gen email marketing messaging, is super important. So I think it's really important. And I think that more go-to-market organizations should really prioritize that SDR to content marketing, product marketing, that feedback loop, and that connectedness.
Awesome. How much of a role do you think, you know, building a, like, quote unquote, you know, personal brand or you know, presence in that community, in that channel, in that space? How important do you see that relative to being able to successfully execute a social selling or community-led growth strategy?
Yeah, I think it's huge, and I think you can't like even have one thing without the other. I think that those two things are extraordinarily connected. I think community-led growth and social selling, there's two kind of big aspects or pillars to it. So there's the content creation piece, and then there's everything that happens in the DMs or even kind of like in the tweets, like tweeting back to each other. So you really get that visibility, and the company you work for really gets that visibility on the like DM side and exchanging tweets and messages, but also with the content that you're putting out there for that community to see. So again, my pillars for the content that I put out and the way that I engage with people is the relatable, the valuable, and the shoot the shit content, and that's super important for the way that I'm creating my personal brand on Twitter and LinkedIn right now.
Do you have any rules of thumb that you try and follow or hold yourself to, as far as like frequency, cadence, length of, you know, things like that, as far as things you're posting?
So a big thing for me, like in terms of KPIs or things that I really hold myself accountable, it's a lot more about the amount of content that I put out, whether it's on LinkedIn, Twitter, and also about the lead magnets that I create and how effectively I can promote those lead magnets on LinkedIn or Twitter. Um, a big thing that I learned about posting on LinkedIn lately is not posting multiple times a day, posting without hashtags, and posting early in the morning, between kind of like 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Eastern is when I've been able to get the most impressions. But posting on LinkedIn every single day during that time frame and like not more than once a day has really helped my reach. And but yeah, big thing for me too is a certain amount of lead magnets that I try to create on a weekly basis, and then how well I'm able to promote those. And those are like big things that I hold myself accountable to.
Whenever you found somebody to reach out to, do you sort of do all of the motions all at once? Do you connect, follow, send a DM, engage with a post they have, or do you have a preferable order of operations?
I don't really have like an order of operations. I think that it's really organic. I really don't view social selling as like a step in a cadence for me. I more view it as like the natural relationship building actually is. So yeah, I think that sales development teams should really get out of their heads that social selling is like crossing off like a view profile or a send connection request kind of thing in their list of to-dos in sales loft or outreach. And it's a lot more about like when are your prospects posting and being really quick to engage with them, like exactly when they're posting or within a few minutes of posting, and just having that really like tight, organic, real relationship, opposed to they posted 2 weeks ago and now I have a LinkedIn task that I have to check their profile and engage with something there. It really doesn't work. And that's why you have to be so kind of tight and immersed in that community and be in it all the time. I really don't think it's just like a step in a cadence.
Perfect. But now that you're getting away from like trackable activities and steps and cadence and stuff like that, as a manager of teams, how do you effectively teach, train, and then monitor and track how well they're doing relative to these things?
That's a good question. So, for what I'm doing right now, the content posting and stuff, like the content posting community led growth of magnets thing is really important because right now I'm not currently a manager. But another thing that I really want to say as well is, I think that each SDR has like their own kind of strengths and things that they're really good at. Like I'm not like an incredible cold caller by any means. So in terms of like managing reps and like monitoring how to improve their performance, I think that if you're a really good cold caller, it doesn't mean that you should drop like everything that you're good at, because like social selling is the like up and coming thing to like talk about or be good at. Um, I'm kind of curious for you. Yeah, can you like do you remember exactly what you asked me? I want to like pull more on that. I kind of wanted to say that and it was sort of related to what you said, but
Yeah, so I think there's two elements to it for those that are
yeah.
that are sold like, hey, we need to be doing this,
Yeah.
and one is how do you effectively train or teach how to do something? And I mean, because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
one of the big reasons why we kind of went down this path we did of like volume and KPIs around activities and stuff like that is that it's relatively easy to track and report on, and it's relatively easy to
Oh,
teach
yeah.
and train. And
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
since what we're talking about, as a solution to the problem we got ourselves into, largely because we focus so much on that other side of the equation, it begs the question: what do we do relative to those concerns or challenges that kind of drove us in that, easy button direction of like, hey, we're just, we're going to give you a script, we're going to give you a list, we're going to track activities.
Yeah, I feel you. So I think that while like if you do the math, if you send like 100 emails, you might get 3 meetings, and like it's a very kind of, as you said, easy to track or easy way to look at it. I think it's a lot about how organizations view outbound as well. So I think that if like an outbound SDR team is under marketing, where like a attribution of social selling efforts to revenue is like a bit more challenging, it depends. It depends too if the SDR program or team is under marketing versus sales. So I think one way that you can kind of monitor performance or just yeah, like monitor performance, like with social selling, is about how many conversations reps are having like with their prospects on a daily basis. So it's not necessarily are these conversations turning into a meeting tomorrow, but like how many relationships are you building or do you have with your prospects at a certain time? And like, yeah, just how many interactions and engagements and conversations are you having with prospects on a daily basis? And then even looking at metrics of like how your posts like on LinkedIn or Twitter, for example, are doing, how many impressions you're getting, and then how many of your prospects are really engaging, like retweeting and reposting what you're sharing, I think is really big too. So opposed to it's more of like kind of these marketing metrics opposed to like the 100 dials or the 50 personalized emails a day.
But is there specific tech that you're leveraging to keep track of those things, or is that more of like a manual process? Like how do you keep track of how many of those conversations you have, what the reach is, things like that?
I use Shield a lot for LinkedIn. A lot of the stuff I am doing right now actually is pretty manually, like it's pretty manual, and I still want to learn a lot about more about tracking it. Basically, I won't lie, a lot of the stuff I do right now is manual, but I do track my LinkedIn reach through Shield.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, and I mean, especially on in your defense, especially on the LinkedIn side, the tech and the capabilities are a lot more limited than they are on a lot of the other social platforms and stuff like that. So it certainly makes it a lot harder to do. And as somebody that's managed teams, it can be a nightmare to figure out like what messaging are they using and what conversations are they actually having and stuff like that. LinkedIn in particular is typically a kind of a black box. You can see using a dialer or logging a calls, who they've called, whether they connect and stuff like that. Obviously, email logging's been around for well over a decade. As far as defaults into systems like HubSpot, Salesforce, or CRM. But social and in particular LinkedIn tends to be a bit of a black hole for people. And so similar question or along the same lines. How do you effectively track attribution and what's coming in from those efforts, especially given that a lot of the stuff is going to typically overlap with what marketing or demand gen teams are doing? And a lot of times I see, hey, that rep was reaching out and stuff like that, but then they came in through an inbound form.
Yeah, that's that's a good question. It's always a challenge, kind of who's going to get the credit for because that's the other thing too, is there's definitely been times where I've created relationships with people online and then they haven't directly come to me when it was the right time to book the meeting. I think it's just really like there's some that are very obviously outbound and some that are very obviously inbound. I think having a really clear like basically just like a document that identifies like if there was this much engagement from an SDR with a prospect, we're going to like call that like an outbound versus an inbound lead. And I think just having really good like documentation, but there's definitely situations where it can be really tricky. It might have been an inbound lead from a year ago, but it was recently re-engaged through that kind of like community-led growth social selling efforts to kind of get them back into our circle. So I think just having strong documentation on like this is one thing and this is the other thing. And I also don't think it should be a battle. It's everybody's job to bring people back in. So it's really about how you look at it.
Amen on both sides of that equation there.
Yeah.
In my experience when I'm managing teams and stuff like that, my general rule of thumb is if that rep within a reasonable period of time, 30, 60 days prior to that inbound, has done any outreach to them, then I'll typically
Yeah.
credit them with that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because I mean, way too many people are like me. They'll bang their head against the wall going through a terrible system and spend twice as long as it would take to pick up the phone and call somebody. But if it keeps them from having to talk to that human being, even though the end result of what they just filled out a form for is to talk to a human being, they're going to do that. And so
Yeah.
it's always
Dri-
remarkable to me to watch that happen.
Drives me nuts.
But yeah, I tend to err on the side of giving credit to the reps, and I've done
Yeah.
a lot of different testing and studies and stuff like that on it where even if you can't do the straight line attribution that a lot of sales leaders and stuff like that really want to see and harp on, you can run those motions separately from each other. You can do ABM targeted demand gen, and you can do siloed rep outbound, and then you can run both of those concurrently together, and have them strategized and operationally working, all of those different angles. And
Yeah.
it's I mean, the proof in the pudding is absolutely clear. Your cost per lead on the paid side goes way down. Your conversion rates on those named accounts goes way up. Your time in campaign goes way down. And so it's not debatable that it's moving the needle, even if there's not that straight
Yeah.
line attribution side of things.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. And you mentioned something earlier on that I think is really important to point out. So, there's the tech side of things, there's the attribution, tracking, reporting piece of it, and stuff like that. But it also oftentimes, requires a little bit higher level of sophistication of understanding of this. And so it may not
Yeah.
necessarily just be attribution and making sure that we're giving credit where credit's due and all of that stuff. Numbers might actually be lower far as volume, but it makes sense if you're doing that sort of more full motion, sophisticated understanding of it, where it's like, okay,
Yeah.
those people are more likely to show up to a meeting. They're more likely to be
Exactly.
qualified. They're more likely to move on to an actual opportunity. They're more likely to close. There may be a higher ACV associated with it. Um,
Yeah.
but of course, for your average outbound rep, that's stuff that's going to be to a large degree outside of their realm of sophistication or understanding. They may not even have access to the data. Any suggestions for reps kind of struggling on that side of things, where as far as just volume output, it looks like it may not be something that they can make the case for. How can they go and talk to management, or layers above them about what to go look for?
Yeah, so it's really tricky because like obviously SDRs are responsible for like very top of funnel stuff like meeting booked and then like often meeting occurred different or and then sales accepted opportunity, different companies call them different things. But even in terms of the show rate, like prospects that I've seen show up to meetings, and again, I don't want to stir the pot too much, but I think a lot of
Please
times
do.
when SDRs are cold calling people, I think sometimes it's like a little awkward and people feel awkward trying to get off the phone and it's like a little bit of cornering and you're like, yeah, I'll take the meeting, especially if you're calling sales leaders, like like what it's like to be cold calling people and you just feel awkward being rude. But for like, in my opinion, when you're emailing people and you're kind of doing this social selling community led growth approach, people are just more likely to actually show up to the call because they didn't feel cornered into it. But again, like what I would say is that these things take time. So if you have 10 meetings that you've booked kind of through each channel and then looking at them 3 months down the line from like when they were initially booked, and then like did 90% of the social selling meetings occur versus like 50%, like I'm just being silly, I don't want to yank the chain of cold colors too much. But I think it just kind of takes that time. So what I would really try to do is like book several meetings through each channel and then just evaluate over time and kind of come back with a report saying, like from what I can see in Salesforce, like this is how many sales accepted opportunities. This was the like average contract value of like sourced deals like from each channel. Like it's going to take a little bit of time, but I think that's the real way to do it is to have meetings booked through each channel and then just over time see that progress. and then come to your leadership team kind of like with a presentation and some insights. And that's just kind of like how you're starting to build out this proof in the pudding that social selling deals. Again, not always, but can often be like of higher quality because you're building those real relationships. People don't feel cornered, and it's kind of like creating that inbound. They're eventually starting to come to you through your content and just your relationship with them.
Awesome. So yeah, we talked about it takes time. You've got to work this relationship over time, stuff like that. How do you keep track of and stay on top of all of these different conversations at various stages and stuff like that that you've got going? So you make sure that nothing falls through the cracks, that you're staying front and center with those. Because that's been one of the big things I've seen reps struggle with on that side of things. Like they'll do the outreach, they'll get the connections, they'll get the conversations going, but then as far as like, hey, they never got back to me, and then a lot of times it'll fall through the cracks, and then it's like, oh shoot, it's been 30, 60 days since last time I had a conversation with it. It sort of died on the vine because they didn't reply to the last thing that I said to
Bum, ba-da-dum. So
them.
just like managing all those people, and it's kind of how do you know when it's the right time to take it to the next level, or just kind of keeping track of all these like social selling conversations you're having. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm really big on like whether it's sales loft or outreach, kind of like general tasks. So I like I'll have a list like in Google Docs that has kind of a like because usually it's not going to be a crazy amount of contacts that I have these like I feel relatively close relationships with. Could be between like 20 to 50 people on a Google Doc. I'm like kind of skimming through these people once, two, three times a week to kind of stay engaging with their stuff, like sending them follow up messages or if they posted something, just engaging with their stuff. But also, if I just kind of like made a comment on like a LinkedIn post that they made, I'll like just set up a reminder and outreach to go back and say, hey, like I thought I left a clever comment on your LinkedIn post, like haven't heard from you in a while, what's up? And if that relationship is really there, like they should kind of get back to you. And then I have a couple of clever like Mr. Bean memes and stuff like that. Just kind of like that humor side to get people to respond if it's been a while since I've heard from them. So those outreach tasks, and then I also have that like master Google Doc that just kind of like from a top view, like these are all the people that I'm talking to, and then yeah, just like setting up those outreach or sales loft tasks, and it's like I haven't heard from like if I haven't heard from Bobby, like send like you know what I mean, make a note in 10 days to send him a funny Mr. Bean meme or something like that.
Are there any details or notes on the prospects or anything like that that you typically make sure that you've logged or recorded as a reminder or give yourself context? Are there sort of standard things you try and have in there? Or is it just kind of based off of what you're seeing on a individual prospect contact basis?
I would say it really depends what's on their profile and what kind of content they're posting, people they're engaging with, and just kind of how they're behaving. So I wouldn't say that there's like specific things that I always want to highlight. I think one thing to take note of, and I don't know how this is going to come across, but like building relationship, like I definitely focus on building relationships with um people that have more like seniority in an organization because you can spend a lot of time like I'll do high volume like email and calling activity to like mid-level managers and kind of the 4 or 5 prospects, but like I'm going to really focus on those like higher quality relationships like with the more senior executives at the organization. But I would say it really just depends on what they're posting and what's on their profile of like how I'm interacting with them. But no real main kind of big points. Just the only thing is I'll spend the time fostering the relationships with the more senior executives because it's more like worth everybody's time, or especially worth my time, I guess. I don't know. That's rude to say, but it is what it is.
Awesome. So we're coming up on the end of the time. I got one general question to ask to kind of cap things off with. Um, uh, for anybody that's looking at or considering or just getting started in their career as a BDR, um, what advice do you have for them for getting off the ground? Not even, if it's related to social selling, community like growth, fine, but just in general, if you're talking to them, what advice would you give them?
Um, the biggest thing that I can recommend is I'm not joking, but joining communities like Rev Genius. I don't know if I can say your competitors on here. Join communities like Rev Genius, like Pavilion. I used to belong to an organization that was called SDR Nation, and I would just go into these communities. Engage with content that I was specifically interested. So I was kind of like gravitating towards people who were putting out content on email copywriting and social selling, and just say, hey, I'm new to this. I'm like really eager to learn about social selling or about email copywriting or about cold calling, and just get on coffee chats with people and meet a bunch of people. The other big thing that I like to do is if I have examples of like small successes I've had, even as like kind of an entry level SDR that doesn't have a lot of experience, I like to really showcase kind of like my successes or things that have been going well with me in these communities, and then also just posting them on LinkedIn. I think that on LinkedIn and Twitter, people can be very preachy about what they've accomplished or what kind of strategies they believe in, but they don't share a lot of examples. And I think that you just got to promote yourself. You got to like show examples of how you're doing really well. You got to meet new people. And I think that in a way, some people are against like messaging people and saying, hey, like, can you engage with my post? Can you interact with it? Can you like it? What do you think? But if you're not going to advocate for yourself and kind of put yourself out there, share examples of how you're doing well, nobody's going to do that for you, right? You just got to put yourself out there, meet new people, join those communities, network, and do a little bit of humble bragging about yourself.
Awesome, awesome. Well, this has been fantastic. Before we wrap up, Monica, let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter. My handle is MCIL Marketing. And then on LinkedIn, you can find me. My name's Monica McElroy. My last name is MCILROY. And I post lots of pictures on Twitter about Dusty or of Dusty. So definitely connect with me on Twitter too. I'm really trying to build up my community on Twitter and meet some people there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. This has been great. And we'll be back next week with our next one.